This movie is primarily about chart design. We're going to first, though, begin with some basics, copying a chart, moving a chart, and resizing a chart. And then we're going to see we can quickly use the Design tab to change the type of chart that we have. We can save our chart as a template so that we can use the chart layout in the future. We can copy data into a chart. We can, with one click, pivot the chart so that what's displayed on the vertical and horizontal axis flip-flop. We can change the data by using the Select Data Source dialog box that has some other useful functionality. We can select from a gallery of chart layouts that will add components to the chart. We can select a chart style, which will change the color and the appearance of the chart. And finally, we can move a chart onto its own chart sheet or move it from a chart sheet into a worksheet. So I have some data, and in chart speak, I have categories that are defined with the year, and I have two series for each year, including the unemployment rate and the job creation number for the entire year. I'm going to create a chart by selecting that data and then left-clicking Insert, and then left-clicking Column, and then clicking on Column Chart. Now, there's a number of problems with this chart that we're going to fix later on, but for the time being, I'm going to ignore the issues. Since we just created the chart and it's selected, the Chart Tools contextual tabs, the Design, Layout, and Format tab, are displayed. With the chart selected, I can Control-C, go to a different location, right-click, and paste a copy of the chart. I can also grab the edge of the chart and, getting my four-sided arrow, move the chart, and I can grab the side of the chart and resize it. I'm going to delete that. With our chart selected, and I'm going to reselect it, we can go to the Design tab and left-click in the Type group, Change Chart Type, where we get the whole gallery of options of charts that we can double-click on and change the type of the chart just that quickly. We can also, if we get to the point where we have a chart that we like, we've put some work into the formatting and creating the elements of the chart, save the chart as a template. Back to the Type group, left-clicking Save as Template. I'm going to accept the default name, Chart 1, and then save that. The chart template doesn't save the data that's plotted on the chart. I'm going to delete this chart and going to the Insert tab, launching the Insert Chart dialog box, and then I'm going to go to the Templates folder, and there's the template we just created. I can select it, left-click OK, or I can double-click and launch the chart. So the chart template is an empty, formatted container that you can copy data into. In fact, you can copy data into any chart. And the way you do that is to select the data, Control-C, and then select the chart, right-click, and then left-click Paste. So once again, we have some issues with this chart that we're going to fix in the future. And you'll notice that I didn't copy all of the series into the chart. I didn't do that because I wanted to show you that you can copy a series into a chart that already contains data in the same way, right-clicking and pasting the job creation series into the chart. Going back to the Design tab, we can also, with one click, go to the Data group and pivot the chart so that the row and the column are switched. Now that's one ugly chart that's confusing, so it doesn't work so well with this chart, so I'm going to pivot it back. And I'm also going to change the chart type back to a column chart by double-clicking that. So I mentioned when I first created this chart that there were some issues. One of the issues is that Excel thinks, since the year is numerical, that the year represents a series, and it's plotting 3 series in this chart, although you can only really see 2 of the series. And that brings up the second issue, which is the unemployment rate, which is a number that's so small relative to the scale that was created in the chart because of the job creation numbers that you can't even see the unemployment rate. So it looks like there's only 2 series that are plotted. So we're going to fix both of these things, beginning with the fact that Excel thinks that the year is a series. To do that, we're going to go to the Data group and left-click Select Data. This is one of the most useful dialog boxes when you're dealing with charts. I can change the chart data range by selecting a new range, and if this dialog box gets in the way, you can collapse it down with this button, and I'm going to reselect all of the data this time and then expand it back out. You can also switch the rows and columns, and you can add and remove series. The job creation data is series 3. I can select that and remove the series, and I can add that series back in one of two ways. It's currently selected, so I can add the series back by first defining the series name, and then I can define the data that makes up the series, left-clicking OK, and I've added the series back, and I've named the series as well. So while I'm at it, I'm going to rename series 2 by editing it, left-clicking OK, and I still have an issue with series 1. Excel created series 1 because, as I said, the year is numerical, so Excel thinks it's yet another series, but it's not. So I'm going to select series 1, left-click remove, and that's a little better, but I still have the problem where the horizontal axis is mislabeled. And this is the other issue that you can run into when you have categories that are numerical, which is what we have. In order to change the category labels, go over to the horizontal axis or the category axis, select the range that contains the labels, left-click OK, and we've now made a couple of major corrections to this chart. The other options offered by this Select Data Source dialog box is how to handle hidden and empty cells. You can show empty cells as gaps, as zeros, or you can connect the data points with a line if you have a line chart. And finally, you can check the box that says Show Data in Hidden Rows and Columns. It's not checked by default, so that when you hide rows or columns, that data won't be plotted on your chart unless you left-click this checkbox. So I'm going to left-click OK. So there's two more problems with this chart. One is that the vertical axis is displayed as a percentage, and the other is that the series, the unemployment rate, is all but invisible on the chart. So I'm going to close the Select Data Source dialog box, left-clicking OK to accept all the changes. And we're going to do a couple of things that are going to take us off of the Design tab. First, we're going to go to the Layout tab, where in the Current Selection drop-down list, we can choose either one of the series. What we want to do is select unemployment, because we can't really select it on the chart because we can't see it to select it. So I'm going to choose unemployment, and Excel has selected all of those data points in the series. Now I'm going to right-click that series and left-click Format Data Series, and we're going to create a secondary axis by simply left-clicking Secondary Axis, closing, and since this is really not the ideal way to display this information, I don't think, we might want to create a combination chart by converting the unemployment rate to a line chart. And we can do that by going back to the Design tab, left-clicking Change Chart Type, and then double-clicking Line Chart. And since we set up this secondary axis on the right side for the unemployment rate that's a percentage, we corrected both problems at the same time. And now the vertical axis on the left side is not displayed in terms of percentage any longer. The next group on the Design tab is the Chart Layouts group. We can page through the options. There's only 2 rows of options in this case. These chart layouts will include different configurations of elements of the charts, including chart titles, legends, horizontal grid lines, data tables, axis titles, and so on. The minimalist version of this would be that, where you have none of those other identifying elements. And the other extreme may be this option, which includes a data table that lists the data that makes up the chart. I mentioned when we talked about having a chart on a chart sheet that you can add a data table to the chart if you want to include the visual display of the data that's making up the chart. That's one way to add the data table. We're going to also find in the Layout tab that we can add these elements of the chart individually. Moving to the Chart Styles group, again, we can page down through the 6 pages that are listed or look at all of the options that we have. Unfortunately, we don't get a preview, but these options really just change the color of the bars or the lines and or the chart area for the chart. Finally, there's the Location group, for which there's one command button, where we can move the chart to a new sheet, a new chart sheet, left-click OK, or if we have it in a chart sheet already, we can move it back to a worksheet. We'll go back to where we came from. So that's the Charts Design tab. We began by copying, moving, and resizing a chart that we created. We took that chart and changed the chart type using a command button in the Types group on the Design tab. We then made a template out of that chart, which is an empty container that's a pre-formatted style of chart. We pulled up that template, copied data into it. We switched the horizontal and vertical row and column by left-clicking the command button in the data group to do that. Then we went to the Change Data dialog box where we could manually select the data. We could redefine and label our series. We can add, remove, and edit the series that were already in a chart. We can define and change the category labels that are usually on the horizontal axis, but they can be on the vertical axis if we've made a bar chart, for instance. And then we took a look at the chart layouts, which is a gallery of options that are different configurations of chart elements. We looked at the Chart Styles gallery that gives us a lot of options as far as what color we want our chart to be, including filling in the chart area itself. And lastly, we went to the Location group where we had a command button where we could move our chart into its own chart sheet or move it from a chart sheet back into a selected worksheet.